Rightio. Good afternoon, and sorry it's been a few weeks since the last one. I've been reminded I haven't done it for a little while. In this video I'm going to run through how to do a couple of different ways of automating period progress or disturbance area, or plots for both your source schedule but also destination schedule. So a few different options, a few different looks. If you haven't done this before, it might be helpful. So to start with, what we're going to need, and what we're going to need primarily to start with if you don't have it already, is somewhere to store your period progress. Now, they've got a pit polygon, but generally, depending on the kind of work you're doing, but I'm going to talk about using block polygons primarily. And I'm not going to be talking about the various options to get different kinds of block polygons. There are some tricks to this, and that's a kind of a separate thing. If you struggle with generating your block polygons, if they don't look as how you want them to look, it's a sort of a separate thing to raise with us. But I'm still going to have to generate them here. So to generate plotting polygons, what I do is I go to my table setup my table plots menu, and then from here right click, generate plotting polygons. And generally for this kind of work, block level, so removing the horizontal cuts, so just vertical cuts here. So, and input solids, generally whatever feeds in. Polygon Z level is not super important. Output range, not super important, but where we write it to, I'm going to go with block polygon for this one. And I'm going to write it to everything. They don't take up a hell of a lot of room in the database. So there's other tricks to using this system, but for the time being, as I said, the purpose of this video is not really to talk about the options with the polygons. So I'm going to generate those polygons, and that's sort of part one. Part two of getting this working is having somewhere to store the dates for both the source and the destination. So if you don't already store the various dates for your post-schedule tasks, so that's going to be the creation of a folder. I would recommend a separate folder, post-schedule tasks. And for the purposes of this, on the source side, I just want first touch. So the first time anything in the record, whether it's topsoil or free dig or weathered or whatever materials, the types that you've got, it could be coal depending on the way it is set up, but the first thing that gets touched in the block. In terms of aggregation, I'm going to set it up to be called minimum excluding default. So the default date is the first of the first 0001. So we don't want to see that included in our minimums, but otherwise first touch will be based on minimum. So we need somewhere to store that date. And I'm going to, while I've got the process going, I'm going to do the same thing for my destination side. So I've already got somewhere to store the dump polygon, but I don't have somewhere to store the first touch and the last touch. So post schedule tasks, excuse the keyboard sounds, my microphone's a bit sensitive today. And we'll go with first touch, I'm going to go with last touch, but we're going to revisit this. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that might come in handy as well. So first touch, last touch, somewhere to store the polygons, and if they haven't been generated, I may as well jump in here and generate my dump polygons as well. So we're just kind of setting everything up for the time being, not anything new. If you've done the training, you should have gone through some version of this, so I'm skipping past it pretty quickly. Okay, so if we start with the second component of this, is we need some post-schedule tasks to write dates back. So these are in a sort of a incomplete state. So we're going to create a new post-schedule task, and this is going to write the first date. I'm going to set up a run condition, not that it's really important, but I'm going to set up a run condition that means this only runs when you're source scheduling, because you don't really need to worry about, it'd only take up half a second to run if that, but it's just good practice. If it doesn't change, if you're not source scheduling, then you put run source scheduling as the filter here to true or false. It just refers to whether or not you have this option ticked on. So value expression, so what we're going to do here, there's both a schedule min and a schedule first. Schedule min is, they're going to return the same thing. So schedule min, and so the earliest, and we're going to go with start date. So the earliest start date, and that is going to return from the output schedule. It's going to look at all the lines of the output schedule for each record on the table and say, give me the earliest start date. You may want to limit. So you may want to have separate fields for processes, topsoil, free dig, etc. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm just going with first touch. If you want to deal with last touch and other things, I'll show you a couple of other looks with the dump polygons. So for the time being, that should be sufficient to get that going. And then what I need on the deposit table now is, I'm just going to run that one so that I've got some dates on the table. That will run every time you run a schedule. You could also run your schedule up here. So I'm going to go back to the table plots now, and I'm going to generate my first table plot based on this. So I'm going to go to new table plot. I'm going to call this disturbed, and then I'm going to give it a date. So I'm going to go disturbed. I actually don't know what my range of dates are at the moment, so I'm just going to put disturbed date. Here, usually, almost always, it's the same expression that you use to generate the polygon. So for me, it's at a block level. The solid field is going to be that block polygon that I created. And then the value expression, we're going to switch this to be a date time type. And here what we're going to do is we're going to read the value off of the table for the date that we created. So it'll be down here in PostScheduleTasksFirstTouch. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to put in FirstTouch. We're going to go with GetValue. Now there's one additional trick for this that you need to do, which is if you don't have a value. So I'll show you in a second what happens, but if you don't mind something, so if we generated that table plot, so if I go to disturbed date, what you're going to find is probably need some colors that will help. Disturbed date. As I said, I didn't run a test case on this one, so we'll just go with, yeah, that's fine. Try that. Dates are probably not quite right. So yeah, so you'll see a bunch of records on here which have January 0001. That's the start date of that's the default date if nothing actually gets done. So in this particular model, every record in that range has been pre-scheduled out, so it never really gets mined. So what you want to do with that is in your range for your table plot, you want to create a new range called mind. Doesn't really matter. It has an asterisk in the text filter, and the expression filter is just that date is greater than is not the default date. So we're going to go to first touch, going to go get value. I'm just going to say, I don't know, just greater than the 1st of January 2000. Anything that's greater than the 1st of the 1st 01 is going to be treated as something that has been mined. So if we put that in, it just won't include the records that aren't actually mined. Now this model that I've got here has a pretty early start date, January 2019. Yep. So the earliest touch of any of these records, if we hide those solids for a second, so all of my colors have been based on the current date, not on the date of my schedule. That's because the table's not smart enough. Table doesn't actually know that the case is there. So go back to my colors real quick, set up the colors that I want. So this is where you might want to do yearly, quarterly, etc. I just need to push mine back a year. You might want to set a variety of more distinct colors to help you see differences between things. Once again, this is really not the focus of the exercise, but what we've got now is a table plot where the polygons themselves are colored by date. Now this is already sort of covered in the documentation. It's the next component that is just a small tweak that can help you keep everything up to date. So if we pop open a separate animation, separate setup, sorry, go to my post schedule tasks. One of the post schedule task options is to regenerate table plots. So if you want to make sure that they are getting done, disturbed areas, you can pick your table, you can pick your plots that you're interested in. Once again, you can set a run condition. So if you want to take the run condition that it only gets updated on source scheduling, you may also want to create some other conditions in terms of when it gets regenerated. And then from here, what will happen is if you make a change to the schedule, and I'll just make a reasonably dramatic one to drive home the point, I'll just turn off one of the bits of gear. Should make a pretty decent difference to the schedule. Rerun my schedule. and my polygon will change. So I'll turn that one off again, rerun, just so that it drives, just so it's clear that the colors themselves, or the plot itself, is getting updated. So something else is happening to the schedule, but that's making some, as I said, making some pretty drastic changes. So that is pretty much the simplest way to hook up a post-schedule task to your table plots. So if there's something about that particular process that went a little too quick, or you want to step through something, feel free to let us know. In terms of dump polygons, there's just a couple of extra things that you may not have thought about, or you may not be aware that you can do, which I'll show you now, which is we can pretty much do the same type of table plot on the dump side. We still need post-schedule tasks. This time what we need is a post-schedule task that writes to the dump, so first and last touch. And we'll go first touch, we'll have an entry for last touch, very, very similar to first date on this one. So I'm just going to actually take the expression, so I'm feeling lazy, schedule min for the start date, and schedule max for the end date. So the last end date and the first start date. No other information is really needed to tidy up here, but I also want to add in that destination scheduling is happening here. Once again, no point in updating it if it's not. And so I'm going to run that one. I'm going to head over to my destination table. I'm going to create a table plot just as before. Create a new one, call this disturbed area. And then I'll create a copy of it in a moment to do rehab as well. So I'm going to go with my dump polygon, change it to a date time. I'm going to read that start date. I must have called it first touch, sorry. First touch, there it is, get value. And once again, I want to make sure that I only generate polygons for things that are touched. So I'm going to put in a dumped range with an asterisk filter where that date is greater than 0. I think I called them touched, didn't I? So first touch greater than 1 Jan 2000. Okay, so finally, another date range, series of date ranges. Saved my information from before. Generate that layer, load it up on the screen. Series of disturbed areas. Looks like I haven't set aggregation, which was a mistake. Yeah, this should probably throw up a warning. I might note that down for future reference. When you use getValue on a table plot function, an expression, it looks for the aggregation on the table, and if there's no aggregation set, it just kind of falls over. That is something we should warn you about that we don't currently do. So we'll regenerate that layer. It's going to be harder for you to pick that up than it is for me. Okay, so you can see now I've got a variety of colors, and this is sort of showing roughly when the first time something gets dumped into an area. Now, you may want to know, for the purposes of reporting, some period of time before that. You might want to set arbitrarily a few months, 12 months, 6 months, whatever it is, to allow you to understand what date, for purposes of communication, that you actually need to start doing your clearance or prep or topsoil movement or cutting, logging, whatever it is they need to do to get prepared for the dump. So another trick that you can do is, if we go into those fields, we've got first touch and last touch. If we create a copy of first touch and we go first touch SubPrep or something, you can call it whatever you like. You can turn this into a calculated field, and there's functions in here that let you add, or in this example, subtract months from a certain date. So if we go AddMonths first touch, and I actually haven't tested this, so we're about to find out if we can do negative months, otherwise we might have to do it a slightly different way. First touch, and then we'll just go with -6. And then we'll create a copy of that table plot. Disturbed area, 6 months. We'll change the date that's being read, which is called first touch SubPrep. We'll need to make some adjustments to these dates. So we'll start the year before. we should have it's quite possible that that subtraction doesn't work. So let's have a look up here. Yep. Nope, that's okay. That's all right. I'll show you a different trick. So coming back to the field for that one, was worth a shot. Rather than add months, what we can do is we can use a date function. So there's a, where are we? Total days. Go with days, total minutes. No, let's just create a new date. So we'll go with date, and date wants three things. If we look at the date function, it wants a year, a month, and a day. So what we can do is we can get the year, actually, what's the simplest way to do this? As I said, I didn't actually prep this. If I wanted to subtract 6 months, it's actually a tiny bit trickier than I wanted it to be. We might wipe days off of it for the moment. So we might go with that minus total days this was sillier than I thought it would be to actually do in my head. As I said, I didn't actually prepare this one. Let's do with total hours represented by, if I want to subtract 6 months and it's in January, ticks, time span, month. We should just be able to go with date from text. That's not going to work either. Year, month, day. Should be much easier than this, but I cannot think of what it would be. Day, day of week, day of year, days and month. Minute. It's probably my best video yet. Total days, time span. If we had that subtract, it's going to be the easiest way to generate a 6-month reduction. Subtract. It's probably going to be to subtract, to start with the year before and then to add 6 months. It sounds like it's really convoluted. I'm going to have to look into a better way to do this, but for the time being, it is what it is. So if we take a date, we're going to grab the year from this one and subtract 1. It's a bit silly, as I said. We're going to take the year from this one, minus 1. We're going to take the month from it, same month. So take the month from it. Then we're going to take the day from it. So that's returning okay at the moment. And then we need to add 6 months to that, which is a really silly way to go about it. But take that, add 6 months. Finally, there we go. Sorry you had to sit through that, but we got there. So that one there is it's probably going to fail on, and that might be the whole reason why it struggled. It's going to fail on the ones that are the default date. So if this is much sillier than I had anticipated, if that is greater than 1 Jan 2000, then otherwise give me 1101. It should be okay now. Yeah. First touch, SubPrep. One more change. It's actually interpreting that as 2001. I needed to interpret it as the default date. There we go. Okay, so I'll put that formula in the comments. Trickier than I'd hoped to go backwards in time, but we're there. So you can see that the first touch is now first of the 1st 2019, but we've got a date on it now that shows 6 months earlier. So if we look at table plots now, regenerate, that was the main trick for that one. Go back to the date, we're now subtracted. So if we look at this one here, it happens in March 2020, but a 6-month delay, September 2019. So you can step forwards and backwards. There's also the last touch date. You could add months. Adding months is much easier than removing them. But yeah, I might go in and trim that video down if you're watching it live. The two of you that are watching it live, apologies for that. But yeah. In terms of then tying it up, the last final thing that you'd need to do is point your post schedule task to regenerate that table plot. So this would be dump area. This one would go on the destination table. The table plot involved would be the disturbed area ones, and you would only run them when destination scheduling. And that's it. So hopefully that adds some value for you guys that are looking to generate 2D plots. You can kind of follow the same theory for your solid colors as well. So if you haven't already watched, there's a video on solid colors, and there's a guide on how to do a variety of different solid colors. It's just a slightly different way of looking at it. And then once you've got your table plots, you can spit them out to a variety of options. You can now spit them out to PDF. And as a side note, you can actually now import PDF. So if you want to store, older versions of things, you can actually sort of keep a track of them in a variety of different ways now. So anyway, thank you for your attention. Have a great weekend and see you next week.